Hello, how are you? Hi, Diana. Hope you're good. Can you hear me okay? Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Hi, Deidre. Can you all hear me? Hi, Carol. We'll give everybody a few minutes to come in. Oh, good. Okay, you can hear me. All right. I wasn't 100% sure. Hi, Linda. And Linda, I didn't forget about your question with using a different machine. So we'll talk about that, okay? And if I forget, sometimes I get so involved with what I'm doing, I forget. Hi, Gail Cox. How are you? Um, yeah. So this is going to be a fun one. Happy 2025. Oh, good. Okay, great. Thank you for letting me know. So anyway, I hope everybody had great holidays and that you're all enjoying some weather. I hope none of you are out in California or in the path of those fires. How horrible. Hi, Janet. It's a chilly day again in Connecticut. Linda, you're at Joanne's and your alarm went off. How perfect. Maybe if you have a crowd of people gathering around, you could tell them to subscribe to my channel. Good. I've got just 12:01 Eastern time, so we'll give everybody a couple of minutes to get in. But before we start, though, if anyone has any questions, just put them in the chat, and I will try to get to everybody's questions. But I'm kind of excited about showing this today. Hi, Suzanne. Oh, Suzanne, where in California are you? I have a niece in, hi Marthann, I have a niece in the Oxnard area. And so far, she said it was okay. She said there was one day that, hey, from Tucson, hi Paula. Let me shut this off. She said that there was one day right when the fires were starting that they could smell some of the smoke. I think they were okay though, as far as getting, staying out of the way of it. Hi, Celeste from Santa Rosa. Good for you. Good, good. That's a real pretty area. I also have a niece in the Sausalito area, and I haven't heard anything from her, so I'm assuming she's okay. Cambria. Suzanne, you're right. It is a wake up call for everybody. Martha, and you said, yes, it has been extremely cold in Connecticut. Yesterday, we had a little bit of a reprieve from the cold. It was milder, but now I think we're supposed to get hit again with some cold days. Teresa, you're in Santa Cruz. Hello. Thanks for joining in. We'll give everybody another minute to get in here. So, but anyway, everybody I know so far has been out of harm's way, but we'll have to say a prayer for those people. Hi, Mary from the Netherlands. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, thank you. I hope all is good over there. You must be having some winter weather as well. So, okay. So I think we will get started. I'll just do a little bit of my usual housekeeping, but welcome to all of you. Happy 2025. Oh, from Montreal. Thanks for joining. Um, Happy 2025, and I hope you all had a wonderful holiday season. I did. We were very, very busy. We had a lot of company, but it was all wonderful. Everything went well. I always keep my fingers crossed for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day for people who travel and come for dinner at my house on Christmas Eve, because it would be a shame to have them not be part of it. But so far, so good. We had good weather that night. So anyway, I just want to mention a few of my usual things. I always like to say that I have the Ambassador Appreciation coupons for Bernina. If you are considering purchasing a Bernina or Bernette machine or software, or all of the above, and it's a purchase of $1,000 or more, please contact me before you make the purchase for an ambassador coupon. This is good for people in the United States because it is a Bernina of America benefit, and this is a $100 rebate from them as a thank you for tuning in, as well as purchasing the machine or software. So that's for Bernina, Bernette machines and or software. And again, I am an ambassador. I do not receive any kind of commission on sales or anything like that from Bernina or Wonderfil. You'll hear me talk about their threads as well today. But I do not receive any kind of compensation or commission for sales. I just like to recommend things that I like and products that work well and that I think you will enjoy as well. So anyway, today we are going to do the 7-Up Scallop Stitch, and this is really pretty. And I worked on this a few years ago. I kind of worked out how I wanted to do it. And there are variations, and if you come up with a different way of doing this, I would love for you to show it and tell us about it. But I'm going to give you the way I've done that. And I'm going to change the camera. I'm going to show you just a couple of close-ups on this. To start with, we are going to be working with the 3-thread rolled hem stitch, but we're going to do a few tweaks on it. So, but we're starting with our right overlock needle and starting in those basic stitch setups. So let's go. I want to show you a close-up of the bag that I did with that. So let me go to that one. This is one of the zipper bags. Now, I am not going to be showing how to make the zipper bag, but we will put a link below the video after it's all recorded. And I do have other tip clips on how to create the whole bag itself. But today we're going to be basically concentrating on the scallop stitch. And I put a little tassel on mine as well. I have a no hassle tassel tip clip again that you can watch and learn how to make those, because those are really fun. Hi Paula, thanks for joining. So that's that one. And let me just open this up a little bit and show you. And the inside I just lined, and we'll talk about all the different components of this. But I'm going to go back to me for a minute and talk a little bit about this stitch. Now, for doing a zipper insertion, as you see on this bag, it's multiple steps. So you do have to keep that in mind. You're going to create that scallop edge on the edges of your fabric prior to stitching in your zipper. And there are a couple of different ways that you can do that, certainly. But there are multiple steps. Also, on this one, let me go back to that again. You can see I did a narrow cover stitch along the edge of that scallop stitch. And the only reason I did that was just to give it a little more definition and make it look almost like a trim that I had applied to the edge of the zipper insertion. So that's that one. But let me pull up a couple more. This is really pretty, I think. And let me bring my camera in just a smidge closer so that you can see this. This is just a quilting weight cotton, and I had a lightweight fusible fleece on the back of this, and I was using this one for practice. And I did not do cover stitching on the edges of this. And I had a darker thread in the needle at the time because I was just doing a practice stitch just to kind of get myself in the rhythm of doing this. But if I were doing this for real, I certainly wouldn't have used that color thread in the needle. I'd have used something closer to that aqua color or the greenish color. Here's another one that I did as a practice also. And what I was doing on these was I was playing around with different stitch settings. So let me go back to me again. But I just want to say on something like this, how pretty would that be to treat almost like a ribbon or a trim for a project that you could applique this on. You can make this as wide or narrow as you want. This is probably a couple of inches wide, but you could do that on anything that you want. So again, it is multiple steps, and it does take some practice. I will say that. It took me a while to kind of get the hang of how I was going to do this whole thing. And the one thing that does take a little bit of warm-up time is getting the rhythm of putting the stitch finger up and down. So I am going to go to the machine, but maybe we'll talk about this first. So we're going to do this stitch using a 3-thread rolled hem stitch. Now, typically with a regular rolled hem that you're doing on the edge of a piece of fabric or a garment, or that you're doing rolled hem pin tucks or something like that, your stitch finger is disengaged. And let me go to that just so that you can be reminded of what I'm talking about. I'm going to take my trim bin off, open up my machine, and let me move my presser foot out of the way. And I'm going to bring my camera in just a smidge closer. Okay. Let me make sure I've got a good focus on that. Okay, so I'm going to put my knife down temporarily. This is my stitch finger right here. And no matter what machine you own, I think your stitch finger will pretty much look just like this. Now, on the bed of my machine, you see the lever that says O for regular overlock or R for rolled hem. And the way this scallop stitch works is I either go with the stitch finger up, that will widen the stitch. If you've taken my Serger Essentials class, you've seen and heard me talk about what the stitch finger does. It not only widens the stitch out because it forms over that, but it also helps support the edge of the fabric because it's a flat metal piece. And when I adjust my stitch width, you can see that moving. The narrower I make my stitch, the closer the stitch finger gets to where the needle is. And when you're forming a serger stitch, it's almost like knitting or crocheting. The farther away the stitch finger is from the needles, the wider the stitch is going to be. And also, so I am going to keep my stitch width dial on 7 millimeters, but it probably won't be quite that wide for this stitch. But then when you do a traditional rolled hem, you disengage the stitch finger. And on my machine, I can pull the lever down to R for rolled hem. And then my stitch becomes very delicate and narrow because it's just forming over this little delicate stitch pin. So that's just a little bit of Serger Essentials. So when the stitch finger is up, that's when you're going to see those scallops. Then when I want the stitch to be very narrow, I'm going to pull that stitch finger back. And how many stitches am I going to do it with the use with the stitch finger up? 7. And that's why I call this the 7-up scallop stitch, because it's going to be with the stitch finger up for 7 stitches, down for 7 stitches. And that's why I say you really need a little bit of warm up on your scrap fabric to kind of get the hang and get into the rhythm of doing this stitch. Now, another important thing to be aware of is if you have speed control on your machine, you want to slow it down to the slowest speed possible. And let me go to my screen and show you how I do that. This is on the L890, but many other machines, also other brands of machines, have the capability of slowing down the speed. And if you've never done that on your machine, and usually when I stitch just regular serging, I have my speed on the maximum, on the highest one, which is about 1,350 stitches per minute. But I'm going to go to the screen just in case you haven't seen how to do this. And on the screen, you see a little dial that looks like a clock. So I'm going to tap that, and I'm going to use the slider and slide that down so that now I've got that on the lowest number of stitches per minute, which is the slowest. It's 600 stitches a minute, which honestly is not super slow, to tell you the truth. And now I can X out of that screen. As I mentioned, I have already set my stitch width dial on 7. Now, let me go back to me for a second. Many of these settings are variable, and some of the things that will govern what you want for your stitch width and or length are the type of fabric that you're using, whether you're using multiple layers with just a lighter weight stabilizer in there, or as I had on this one, just a very lightweight fleece. So that's 2 things. Also, the weight of the thread that you're using. Today we are using a 12 weight thread in both the upper looper as well as the lower looper. And I'll tell you something interesting about this bag that I first showed you too in just a minute. So the number of layers of fabric that you're using with either a fleece lining or a lightweight fusible interfacing, the weight of the threads and the thickness, also just the look that you like. So all of those things will come into play with adjusting what you want. And when I go from one technique to another, I'll play around with those different ones just to see if maybe having a slightly longer stitch or a shorter one is the look that I prefer. Hey, Sunshine from Kentucky, and hi, Paula. How are you? Thanks for joining today. So, okay, so let's go back to the screen for just a second. Okay, so hi, Monica. Well, I'm glad you could join us for the first live Serger Savvy of 2025. Thanks. Good to see you here. Okay, so we are starting with stitch number 8, which is my rolled hem stitch. And if you don't have this machine, again, you'll set up in the traditional way you do for a 3-thread rolled hem. You're going to disengage your stitch finger. Also, you're going to change those tensions. I'm going to leave my right overlock needle tension on the default setting of 4. I'm also going to leave my upper looper on the default setting. But I've also tweaked a few other things in here. And I've mentioned having the memory in this machine of being able to save my favorite stitches and settings. And this is one of those techniques or stitches that, am I going to do this every day? Absolutely not. I might not do this again for a few months. Well, I got the look that I want, so I decided I'm going to save that in my Save Stitches, which is the little heart icon on the right-hand column of the screen. So I'm going to tap that, and I'm going to hit my Scallop Stitch. And now you can see that has a lot of information on the screen for me. I increased my right needle tension to 6.9 because I decided I liked having that snugger tension on the right needle. I left my upper looper tension on the default setting, and I really cranked up my lower looper tension. And that's what pulls that upper looper tension to the back or underside or lower side of the fabric. Now, right below that, in the small print, you see the MTC equals -1. On my machine, I have a dial, and let me go to that. It's right down here. And if you have a baby lock serger, if you open those front doors, you'll see a dial on kind of the wall inside those doors, at the back wall. And it'll have a plus or a minus. That will do pretty much the same thing as my MTC dial. MTC stands for Micro Thread Control. And I am going to bring that down to -1. I'm bringing that down. And what is that doing? Well, let's reopen the machine. I shouldn't have closed it up. But when I have that on the 0, which is the default setting, you can see the position of my stitch finger. When I bring that down to a -1, you see that stitch finger just move to the left a little bit closer to the needles. And I found that that eliminated the needle thread, creating a tiny little loop on the edge of my scallop stitch. In fact, let me go back and show you. I'm just looking to see on my samples if you can see it. I think I might have already adjusted it on these. Oh, wait a minute. I see one. Hang on. Okay, so on this one, before I adjusted that MTC dial, now this is a minor thing. Is it going to really affect the way the stitch looks itself? Probably not. But you can see that I have a few little looser loops on the edge. When I snugged up that MTC dial, those disappeared. You do not see those on the bag itself. And this is why, once again, I always talk about make samples, test everything. Hey, Kathy and Louise, how are you? Make samples and test everything on your samples. That way you're not going back and pulling and ripping out stitches and wrecking your actual project fabric. I always test everything, and that can be a New Year's resolution if you're not into making samples and testing everything to get everything just right. But I do like to work out everything and really look at the stitch front and back and say, let me try snugging up my needle tension. And as I said, it was on 6.9, and we'll show that screen again just so that you can have that information. And actually, let me go back to the screen again. Okay, I thought I had wanted my stitch width on 7, but actually I have stitch width equals 7.5. So I'm going to widen that stitch out just a tiny bit, and let's see what that does. Watch my stitch finger. You're going to see it move ever so slightly to the right. Okay, now we're on 7.5. So, as I mentioned before, I have 12 weight spaghetti thread in my upper and lower loopers. And I'm going to show you something kind of fun about that. Let me go back to my table camera. Okay, so here's this one. Super pretty, really nice. But when I was making this bag, originally I was going to use the lining fabric as the right side of the fabric. And then I had a fruity or 12 weight variegated thread in my lower looper, and I had a solid, slightly darker thread in my upper looper. And that was what was on the right side of the fabric. And now that I'm saying I'm going to show this to you, it's kind of hard to see. But if you look, there is my upper looper thread. Well, when I looked at it after I finished up the edges, I decided, let me show that better. I didn't realize I was out of camera. You can see there is the darker thread. I decided I liked the lighter variegated side better with the fabric. So I just decided this was going to be my right side. This fabric was going to be my lining. And I thought it looked perfectly fine either side that you used. So that was just kind of an interesting thing for me. Hi, Uta. How are you? Okay, so how do we do this? Let's go back to me for just a second and talk about all my settings. So I have my stitch length on 1.1. I have my right needle tension on 6.9. My upper looper is on the default setting of 4, and my lower looper tension is cranked way up to 9. Here's my stitch length. I'm using a stable woven fabric, so I'm leaving my differential feed on 1. That's perfectly fine. My stitch width is 7.5, and I have my MTC dialed micro thread control on -1. Now, this is the really the hardest part of the whole thing, is getting the rhythm. And you kind of have to use a very light foot on your accelerator, basically, because you're going to stitch with 7 stitches with the stitch finger up and then 7 down. And it takes me at least a little bit of warm up and practice to get my rhythm correct. So, and I haven't warmed up today, so you're going to get to see some irregularities, but I think you'll forgive me for that. But I have my 3 layers together. I use the same fabric. I'm just using a little strip. Here's the right side and the lining side, and the lightweight fusible fleece on the inside. But if you wanted to use just a regular SF101, say, a fusible woven stabilizer, that's fine too. It just depends on what you're doing for a project. So let's go and take a look at the machine on the foot. I'm going to back this out a little bit. I wanted to get this in so that you could see that stitch finger clearly. I think that's good. Now, let me just chain off a little bit. Put my presser foot down. That's just the Bernina burp. Chain off a little bit. And once again, oh, I think I'm a little bit overexposed here. Hang on. I think that's a little bit better. Now it's glary. Okay, I think I'll back this out maybe just a smidge more. Okay, now I always say to people, when you're using decorative threads, anything that's a little bit heavier, I like to hold those thread tails until the needle starts stitching in the fabric itself. Otherwise, the thread and the stitching gets built up on that stitch finger. Let's take a look at that again. Right there on the stitch finger. And by pulling it back and holding it, as you're getting started with your stitching on the fabric, you're not going to get that buildup or that big glob of thread at the beginning edge of your project. So hold onto your thread tails. And I'm going to put my knife back up so that we can trim off the edge. Now you do see that I have some pins in here because this is a single-sided fusible fleece and I want to keep all of the layers together. But you notice that they're going down the center of the fabric. They're not close to the edge. The knife is never going to touch them, and in fact the presser foot will easily skim by with plenty of room to spare. So if you do use pins on your fabric and you've got your knife up, even if you don't have your knife up, if you're in cover stitch mode, make sure they're out of the way. Oh, and one other thing, I also, this is just a little PSA from me. I always think it's a great idea at the beginning of every year, toss out your old pins if you use them frequently and use fresh pins, because pins are just like a knife. They get dull. The ends get dull, and it's hard to push them through. And once those needle or pin points are dull, you're really kind of punching a hole in your fabric, and it's harder on your hands. So be kind to yourself and your fabric. Buy yourself some new pins. They're not expensive. It's the same thing as needles. Use fresh needles too. But definitely with pins, it's always a good idea to toss out the old ones, use some fresh ones. And when you do, you will be amazed. You don't notice the pins getting duller as you go along. But when you start to use fresh ones, that's when you say, wow, they really were dull. And it's much easier to snag fabric with old pins. So that's the end of my PSA. So let's go over again to the machine. Okay, now I'm going to put this in. I'll probably just skim off the whiskers on the edge of this since it's a practice piece of fabric. And because I have such a short stitch length of 1.1, I'm going to really hang on to these thread tails so that I don't get a lot of buildup on the stitch finger. And I'm going to use, even though I slowed down my stitch, I'm going to use a light foot on my accelerator. Okay, so now I'm on. So I'm not even going to bother counting that first one, but it's going to be 7 stitches with the stitch finger up on the O, and then I'm going to pull it back for 7 stitches and to the R, and that's where the stitch gets narrow, and this is what creates that scalloped effect on the stitch. So let me bring it down to R, and let's start with 7 stitches with the stitch finger down. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now I'm going to push the stitch finger back up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Bring the stitch finger back down to R. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Stitch finger up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And oh, P.S. if by accident you do 8 stitches, not a crime or not a problem. You haven't ruined your project. Just keep on moving along and do the best you can. Now let's go back to 7 stitches down with the stitch finger. No stitch finger, I should say. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now see, that went 8. I'm not going to worry about it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you also, on the Berninas, have the heel kick on the pedal on the floor, where if you wanted that one more stitch, if you did 6 stitches and then you didn't want to step on the gas again, you can use the heel kick feature on that to get that one extra stitch. Back to no stitch finger again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I do count out loud, even to myself when I'm sitting here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Back down. Actually, I'm doing better today just showing this. Typically, it goes crazy for a while until I warm up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Up. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7. Down. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. So let me just pull this out. I think you can get the hang of what I'm doing here. And let's take a look at it under the table camera. And this will show you, because I set up my threads exactly the same as I did on the zipper bag. Maybe I'll do a couple of more inches just for the heck of it. Hang on. So we're up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Down. You know what? I think what I'll do is I have my stitch width dial on 7.5. I'm going to continue and I'm going to narrow that down just a little bit, and then we can do a comparison of what they look like. There's no right or wrong look. It's the look that you want. But let's bring the stitch width dial down to 6.5 and let's see what that looks like. So we'll have a narrower stitch going along. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oops, I did 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Up. 4, 5, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Bring it back down. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now I'm going to bring my stitch width dial even narrower. Let's bring it down to 5.5. This is I didn't think about doing this ahead of time, but I'm glad I actually thought of it while we were looking at everything. Hi, Denise. Oh, thank you, Kathy. Forgiveness is a good thing. Okay, so now I've got my stitch width on 5.5. Now, if I were doing this to look at and really compare, what I would do is I would draw lines on the fabric and right on my sample fabric, not the real fabric, but on my sample fabric, and I would have stitch width equals 7.5, stitch width equals 6.5, and now I'm down to 5.5. And that way I have a reference for what look do I want, because sometimes depending on the project that you're doing, you may want a slightly narrower stitch or a bolder stitch that's wider. So let's bring this down. We've got it on 5.5, and that dial is directly below my fabric. I can't really show that to you. But that's narrowing down my stitch. So let's bring my stitch finger up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I accidentally did 8. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Don't worry, I will get it one of these times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, and back down. I think that's good. And I'm just going to run it off to the end. Cut my thread. And let's take a look at what this looks like under the close-up camera on the table. I'm just trimming off my my threads. Okay, so here's this one with the stitch width at 7.5. Here is my sample. Let me pull my pins out. We don't need those anymore. Okay, so these beginning ones, stitch fingers up, 7.5, stitch fingers down, 7.5. And you can see the slight variegation. It goes from kind of a deeper red to kind of a pinky red here. There's my 7.5. Now, you see shallower scallops on this one. Here it is with the stitch width on 6.5. And when you give this a press, sometimes you can pull those threads. Just use your fingernail or something. Don't snag it, but you can just close that up with your fingernail. Just sweep it one way or the other. Stitch width is 6.5 here. And then we go down to a very shallow scallop. This is at 5.5. So you can see the difference of how adjusting that stitch width dial will work. So if you wanted something wider, you'd go with a wider stitch width. Something kind of in the middle, you have that 6.5. Something much shallower, 5.5. Now, I mentioned that I had the variegated thread in my lower looper for the bag itself, and I had the darker solid thread in the upper looper at the time. Now it's the opposite, but you can see that if you wanted to change your thread color around, say you're using two different shades or just something for a different look, the one that you see on the face of the bag that I did is actually my lower looper thread, and I switched out where they were on for the sample today. But you can see if I wanted to use that lower looper side, if I change my mind on the fabric or the colors of the thread, it looks beautiful on both sides. And I think part of that is because of that little MTC dial. And again, for people who might have a baby lock serger, when you open your front doors of your machine and you see a little dial on that little black wall, or back wall, I should say, not black wall, back wall, you can turn that down to the minus side, and I think that will snug up those threads for you just a little bit more. Thank you, Uta. Sunshine says, isn't that like the wave stitch? Well, the wave stitch on the baby lock is that is a different stitch kind of altogether, not quite the same look, because the edge of your fabric still remains straight when you do the wave stitch. The little bit of the curve in the stitch is on the inside part of your the face of the fabric. I don't think I'm describing that quite correctly, but with this one, those scallops are on the outside, and they create the wavy edge on the outside. If you look at the wave stitch with a baby lock serger, that wave is kind of, let me see if I have a pen here and I can draw kind of a picture. And trust me, I'm no Picasso, so forgive me. But okay, so I'm just drawing this on my lap right now. So let me just show you on this. I think this is the difference. So on the wave stitch, the edge of your fabric remains straight, and the wave or that little scalloped effect is on the inside of the fabric. So the edge does not change at all. With the 7-up scallop stitch, you have a defined scalloped edge on that. So that is the difference on that. So, and I actually, I'm trying to think. Well, I'll let you, if you have a baby lock with the wave stitch, go ahead and do that, and then you can compare it to what you're seeing when I'm on my screen. Also, I have found, now I have tried this with 8-weight threads and it does work, it's great, but you have to keep in mind that 8-weight threads are about 50% heavier than the 12-weight thread that I'm using today. So you may need to lengthen your stitch a little bit and tweak some of the other settings. As I said earlier, there's really no right or wrong on this as long as you're getting the look that you want. But the things that you're going to be tweaking are your needle tension, and the reason for that, let me just mention that too. The reason I cranked up my needle tension to 6.9 was because I had such high tension on that lower looper thread. Let me just look at my sample and see if I can show you. I think I had my needle tension cranked up in these as well, and I probably chucked out any of the ones that I didn't have it on. Well, this one I probably didn't have it quite as high, but it's kind of hard to see. Let me just see if I can get the camera in to show you. Let me bring it in just a smidge closer. Not really. I think I probably already did, but maybe right here I didn't have my needle tension quite as high, and the needle thread looks like a very, very tiny little zigzag. So by cranking up the lower looper tension and cranking up the needle tension, I eliminated that. So let's look at it on the sample that I did today. This is the right side of the scallop stitch, or the upper looper thread side, I should say, and you don't see any zigzagging on that thread at all, on the needle thread, which is also a red thread, so it's kind of hard to pick out. Now, any questions? Teresa, you're saying, is there a similar way to get the wave look stitch? Not on the Bernina, not for the wave look stitch. Probably technically there is a way to do it manually on the machine, but it's been a while since I've tried it. When I did try it to get it to do it manually, I didn't have good luck, quite honestly. It wasn't regular. It was messy looking, basically. So I just kind of bagged that idea and decided not. But I do love the scallop stitch. Now, who had asked me about, oh, Pat, you've got a good point. You're saying on the baby lock, you can't change needle tensions manually. What do you recommend? Well, you can still use, all right, so let's go back to that question because that was just about what I was going to answer. Now, no, you cannot change your needle or other looper tensions on the baby locks that have the stitch selector with the A, B, C, D. But on the baby lock with the stitch selector, you would have your stitch selector on D as in delicate, which is typical for your rolled hem. Now, you can adjust your stitch width. There is a stitch width dial that you can adjust. There's a big dial with a 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 sets of 1, 2, 3, 4s. And then there's a smaller dial above that. And that's the one that has the little M, and it has a whorl on it, a gray whorl that goes from thick to thin. And the thinner the whorl on that knob is, the narrower the stitch is going to be. I don't think they have numbers on that. I'm not sure. There might be. I think there are. I haven't looked at it for a while. Yes, there are numbers on it. I beg your pardon. But you can decide on your stitch width on that. You see on the Baby Lock stitch width dial, that's right. I haven't looked at it for a while, so I had to think for a second. You see two sets of numbers. You might see 7.5 and 5.0 together. What that's telling you is that if your left needle were in, your stitch width would be 7.5 millimeters wide. With just the right needle in, it will be 5 millimeters wide. So that's the difference with that. So, and you could actually set up your machine with your left needle in and still do that rolled hem setting on it, because the machine is not going to know which needle you have in. You're not going to break your machine, because I used to do it lots of times when I worked on a Baby Lock. And you can play around with that. But you're right, you cannot adjust your tensions, but you can adjust your stitch width, and you can engage and disengage your stitch finger on the Baby Lock. And the way you would do that is on your stitch length dial. And as I said, that is the bigger dial, kind of on the side of the machine below where the needles are. And it has two sets of 1, 2, 3, 4 for numbers, and those are your stitch lengths. And when it says standard, the numbers don't have a circle or they're not shaded. That is with your stitch finger up. So you would do your 7 stitches with the number on whichever one you're using for a stitch length. As I said, mine was on about 1.1. Then you could turn that dial to where it says rolled hem, and that pulls back or disengages your stitch finger on those Baby Locks. So you could turn it to that and count your 7 stitches that are narrow, then turn it back to the other one. You just want to be careful though on that. You may want to make a little bit of a mark or put some tape just so that your stitch widths stay consistent. That's the only difference with the Baby Lock. There might be a little bit more play in that because you're turning a knob or a dial on that. I hope I explained that correctly. But even if you can't change the needle tension, if you have a little bit of a zigzag on your needle thread, that is going to be on the underside of your project. So no worries. But what I would say is, if you're choosing which color you like, make sure that the color you prefer is in your upper looper, and that way you won't have that kind of a zigzaggy look on the right side. I was able to get rid of it because I was able to adjust the tensions. So, but I think that should answer the question. And Linda, you had asked me, you had sent an email last night asking about that. So I hope that answers your question. So what you are going to do, just to reiterate for Baby Lock owners, is you're going to turn that stitch length dial from standard to rolled hem, back to standard, down to rolled hem. And that's what's going to engage or disengage your stitch finger. So I hope that answers the questions on the Baby Lock. And if you have another brand of serger, if you have that lever the way I do on my machine, let me just go back here again to show you. If your machine design has this lever where you can bring that stitch finger up, pull it back, can you see it appearing and disappearing? You can do that exact same thing with your machine. Oh, good, Linda. I'm glad that answered your question. So, but as I said, with the Baby Lock, you're going to have have a little more play and a little more variability in the stitch widths because of the way you adjust your stitch finger. But would it really be the end of the world if you were off 1/10 of a millimeter. I don't really think so. I don't think the world is going to come to an end, and I think it'll be perfectly fine. But it's just kind of a really pretty cool technique to do. I think it's just so, so pretty. Now, I mentioned that to create the bag, I do have tip clips for how to do the zipper bag. That's perfectly fine. But the way I did the zipper, just to let you know, is the first thing I did was the scalloped edge on both sides of the with the fabric that was going to be joined together. And then what I did with the zipper is I basted that in with a chain stitch and Invisible thread. And this is, let me just see if I can show you where it is. Invisible thread is a 100 weight thread. It is super thin, and I pulled out, you can barely see the thread. It's very thin, very lightweight. And I basted that in with a chain stitch. And if you wanted to baste that in, and this is when I inserted the zipper with that narrow cover stitch. But because I was playing around and I really wanted to keep that zipper exactly where I wanted it to be, that's why I basted it first with the chain stitch. You could also just baste it in on your sewing machine if you wanted to, or, oh, heaven forbid, you could also do it by hand, but why do that if you've got a machine for something like that? What Linda's asking, what is the lowest model of Bernina Burnett that has that lever? The L850, which is all manual, it doesn't have a computer interface, has that lever. And I don't remember with the Burnett's whether they do. What you could do is, Linda, go on Bernina.com on their website, look at their sergers and see. And I can also check with some people too and get back to you in an email on that. But all of the L8 series, the 850, 860, 890 have that lever. And I'm not 100% sure on the Burnett's. I tend to think that they do. And maybe even the 460 has that lever as well. I think the 460 does also. And if anyone else has those machines and knows the answer, feel free to chime in on the chat, because I don't want to give out any incorrect information on that. But anyway, going back to my zipper. Okay, so I did the scallop stitch on both of the edges of the fabric before I did the zipper. Then I just basted in the zipper with a chain stitch. And then to give it that kind of a trim look, I did a narrow cover stitch with that variegated thread. You can see how it's kind of pinky here, darker here. And I used a narrow cover stitch with my center and right needle in. That was stitch number 23. And I didn't use my clear foot. I used the C13 cover chain stitch foot, which is that very slim, streamlined cover chain stitch foot. It's narrower than your standard foot, and Baby Lock also has that for their machines that are combo machines or dedicated cover stitch machines. So, and I just went right along there. And that did double duty. That kind of covered the edges of the scallop stitch where the needle of the scallop stitch is. But also, if I had been able to keep my zipper under control, I could have used that too. Or if I had a wider zipper tape on that zipper, it probably would have held it. Oh, Pat, you said that the Juki has that lever also. Okay, great. That's good for people who are Juki owners. So I'm going to open up this zipper just to show you what this looks like from the inside. There's my chain stitch. And actually right under it, you can see that invisible fill thread. But it is so thin, I didn't even bother to rip it out on the face side of that. If you want to look super close, I can see a little bit of it here, but that doesn't really bother me. I don't think anyone else would notice it just looking at that. And this camera is up pretty darn close. Well, I can see it just a little bit right here. So, but are there any questions about that technique at all? I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Now, I gave you the settings for my machine, the Bernina L890. You may want to play around with a few different things on your machine just to get the look that you want. Now, 7.5, it's interesting. That is the widest stitch available on any other brand. Bernina is the only one that has the 9.0 stitch width in overlock mode, but I didn't even go that wide. So I think you could get a very similar look on a zipper insertion. Or how pretty would that be for an edge on a skirt or a dress, or to use as a trim, especially if you don't have any red pieces of thread on it. That would be a really, really pretty way to get a very decorative technique on that, and doing that all on your serger. So I hope you enjoyed that. And Celeste said, would soft lock for more coverage be good to use? You know, soft lock is a woolly polyester. And it's funny that you asked that, because after I went to bed last night, this is the way the brain keeps moving along, even when I'm trying to go to sleep, I was wondering the same thing. And I am going to try out the soft lock just to see. I honestly don't know whether it would, how it would look with this scallop stitch. But it's a good thing to experiment with. So when I get a sample, I will post a picture of that to answer you, Celeste. Does that work for you? Linda says, could I use multiple threads together instead of using my 12-weight thread? Yes, I think you could. Again, if you wanted to use some lighter weight threads, say some embroidery threads and things like that, you could use Thread Fusion for blending your threads. Let me see if I have my little stand here. Yes, it's on the other side of my table. I can't reach it without bumping my cameras. But you could use multiple embroidery threads, and you want to play around with your stitch length dial just to make sure you get a nice coverage on the edge of your fabric. Absolutely. There are so many things that you can do. As I said, you might even be able to use 4 embroidery weight threads in your upper looper to get that look, or 2 in the upper looper, 2 in the lower looper. Try it out one way or the other. There's no right or wrong on this, but I will say you do want to test, because there are things that if your thread is, you've got a lot of thread and your stitch is too short, you're going to get those globs of thread instead of a really nice, beautiful looking stitch. And that's where your testing is going to come in. But I also do like to make sure I stabilize at least the edge of my fabric, just to give it a little bit more, I hate to use the word bulk, but a little bit more body on the edge to give that scallop stitch some support. Monica says you love your Thread Fusion. I do too. I use mine quite frequently, more so than you would ever think, for a lot of different things. But yes, Thread Fusion is that little blending tool where you can use multiples. If I wasn't positive, I was going to bump my thread. Let me see if I can grab it. I'll leave it over there. But you can see that on my website, and I have tip clips on that. Hang on, I'll grab it. Hold on. I know we're going a little bit over time, but hang on. Okay, so this is my Thread Fusion, and this you could put For this stitch, you could go up to 4 embroidery weight threads, maybe 2 in your upper looper, 2 in your lower looper. You could even try 4 machine embroidery weight threads in 1 looper. I've done that with 4 embroidery threads in a top stitch needle for flat locking. Turned out fabulous. It looked really, really nice. So there are a lot of variations and things that you can do. Linda said she's going to try the thread fusion with her applaud too. Yeah, definitely. Deirdre likes her thread fusion too. Good. Well, this is a great little free commercial for that. But it's a lot of fun to use, and I really enjoy it. Before we close, again, does anyone have any questions about the scallop stitch? If you do, or you think of a question after we sign off, you can always email the question to me. It's gail@gailpatrice.com. That's my email address. And because I don't go back to the chat after we're done live, I don't see those questions again. So if you do think of something after we hang up, or you're trying something out and you have a question about something or having a problem with it, shoot me an email. I will answer you. My website name is it's Gail Patrice Design, and it's gailpatrice.com. That is my website. So, and here's my YouTube, and I would imagine you're all already subscribed to it, but if you haven't subscribed, I'd love you to hit that button too. Deirdre said she tried 2 8-weights and couldn't get it threaded. 2 12 works. Okay. All right, so we'll just do one more quick little thing here, because we are a little bit over time. If you're using 2 8-weight threads on any machine, chances are they're not going to, even with the thread cradle, you're not going to pull them through the air threading tubes very easily. What I like to do is I like to use my little bypass brackets on the front of the machine, and just super quick, I'm throwing this all in. Let me just see if I can show you. I can definitely use 2 8-weight threads, but what I do is I use the little bypass brackets. Let me go to me first so nobody's busy. And I'm going to see if I can adjust the camera to show what I'm going to show. I think that should do it. Okay, so here are my bypass brackets. Let me see if I can move this over just a smidge. There we go. And you can see that there are holes through this. When I use 2 8-weight threads in my chain looper, I put my thread cradle through the air threading tube right over here, the air threading port, pull the thread cradle through. But what I do is I bring the 2 8-weight threads down, and I bring them across to the bypass brackets. I pick up my thread cradle through here. And the reason for that is because that is one honking lot of thread to go through that whole threading route with the air threading. And even though the machine stitched fine, I found that it created just a little more drag with it going through the air threading port. So I bypassed that with 2 8-weight threads together. Helen, you're asking what Soft Lock is. Soft Lock is the Wonderful brand of woolly polyester. It's a very, very soft thread. And if you want to hang on for just a second, I'll show it to you. Hang on just a minute. Okay. All right, I'm back. we're really getting off track here a little bit, but that's okay. Let me go to my thanks. Oh, I don't know who that was. Okay, so here is Soft Lock, and this is a very soft thread that is fantastic for using, and I'm going to show you a blanket stitch that I did on polar fleece with that. And actually I used 2 of these variegated soft locks on this. I used it in my lower looper for a 2-thread reverse flat lock that creates the blanket stitch, and I do have an old tip clip on how to do the blanket stitch, which I'm going to redo very shortly. But it's a very soft, fuzzy thread that it's wonderful for lingerie. It's great for baby clothes, blankets, anything that might create a little bit of friction or irritation on the skin. Using the soft lock is great. And I prefer the woolly polyester to woolly nylons. They're both very good and they're both very strong. However, if you're putting it on something that you might use an iron on and pressing, I guarantee you woolly nylon will melt. If you're using it, it's great for rolled hems on napkins. That might be something, if you're using linen napkins that you're going to press before you put them on the table. Use woolly polyester. It has a higher melting point. But that's what that is. It's just a fuzzy, very soft thread. Let me show you in that on that blanket stitch again. That's 2 of them in, and you can see how nice it is against the polar fleece. This is a 200 weight polar fleece, and it stands up to the loftiness of the polar fleece, and it doesn't sink in and kind of disappear. And Celeste said it goes through the loopers very easily. Yes, it does. It does. So we are a little bit over time. So again, if you have any questions that you think of, we're going to sign off. But thank you again for joining me live. And I hope you try the scallop stitch. And if you do, send me a photo. I always love seeing what everybody else is doing. But thanks very much for joining me. And I hope 2025 is a very creative year for all of you. And keep on sewing and serging. Thanks. Take care, everyone. Monica says she loves her woolly polyester. We all do. Thanks. Take care, everyone.